Okay, I'm going to start today by launching a poll um, just real quick because today we're going to talk about OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. So this is just a silly kind of question. You're not being graded, but just wondering which tool do you use to share files with a group? And you may use one or more, as you can see, quite a few, or I haven't shown you the poll yet, so maybe you can't see. Let's see. I love it. Everybody's answering so quick. So the answer may be for many of you, one or more of the above. I should have put an answer for it's complicated
That's accurate.
because it is complicated, and we're going to talk about why it's a little complicated. All right. Let me end the poll. Give it another second. And I'm going to share the results. So we have quite a few people, 42% of people who use one or more tools. We do still have a few people using the network drives to share files, which I do sometimes too as well. SharePoint's pretty low. So we still haven't all gotten into SharePoint. OneDrive and Teams is pretty even. So let me close this out. That leads us to talking about what we're going to talk about today, which is OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. Oh my. This is session 74 of Tool Time Tuesday. Welcome to any of you who are new, and of course, welcome back to anyone who's been joining for a while. I am Larissa Gann from the Research Medical Library, and my colleague Lesli Moore is here with me. She's absolutely integral to these sessions. So though she doesn't always, she's not always the one presenting, I just wanted to give her full credit because I couldn't do this without her. If you have any questions about these tools we're talking about today, you can reach out to me specifically. You can also always reach out to the library because we love to help with questions and get you to the right place. All right, so there's a couple upcoming classes I mentioned a minute ago. We're kind of going over overviews of what these tools are and how some use cases for how we use them. But our good friend Anna Lewandowski has some sessions set up this week where you can ask some specific questions about SharePoint, OneDrive, lists, and Teams. If you haven't signed up for these or you would like to join, these are going to be listed on the Tool Time Tuesday team, and I'm also going to send them out afterwards. So if you've logged in, I will send them out afterwards. There's also a Teams 101 webinar. So again, if you need to dive in deeper to Teams, that is coming up on the 15th. So lots of great events this week. What we wanted to talk about today a little bit is sharing with Office 365, these tools that you're already using, but you may not know how they're connected or why we're using them or the full benefits of them. So we wanted to dive into that a little bit deeper. Again, feel free to ask questions in the chat if you have questions as we go along. So this may seem basic, but let's just go over again what they are. So OneDrive, you hear about OneDrive a lot probably. This is cloud-based storage. It's individual storage for you as an individual is initially what it's for. It's connected to your profile with Microsoft, so your work profile here, and it's really meant for you to store things. So it's like it's an alternative to using a network drive, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. SharePoint is group-based cloud storage and organization. So one of the cool things about SharePoint is it's not just your files, but it's files that you're sharing with whomever is on your SharePoint site. So that is a way for you to, much like a network drive, share things with a group all in one place. SharePoint is permission-based, so you have to select who on that SharePoint site will see the files. Teams is a single point of contact for various Microsoft tools. So we've probably all been in many teams. But what's neat about Teams is that you can integrate all the other Office 365 tools. You can put OneDrive in it, you can put Planner in it, you can add a calendar, lists, OneNote to create one tool for your group to interact in. Well, what we want you to think about Teams for is that it's a tool for communication, for conversations. It's not just a file sharing place. It's really more of a place for you to have social interaction and conversations. The really cool thing about Office 365 is it's accessible from anywhere. All you need is an internet connection and one of the following, which is either the Duo app, somebody's got it, either the Duo app, the VPN, VX Remote, or Velo Cloud. We're all using different authentication methods. Well, we're all using the same, but some of us are using one or the other depending on where we're at in the world. If we're on campus, off campus, in your home office, wherever, there are these different options for authenticating. When you use something like Duo, VPN, VX Remote, what it's doing is just letting your computer know that you're at MD Anderson, you're in the IP range of MD Anderson. So basically all of these are accessible with an internet connection and that Duo or connection to MD Anderson. Okay, someone has already asked about, I often see when I'm looking at profiles, you can see their files they're working on. It's absolutely secure. The only files that you see are files that have either been shared with you or with your department or with your group. You cannot see files that are not shared with you. I know it seems like you can, but I promise you, you can't. They would not allow us to use this if you could see everybody's files, because that would be a violation of PII and PHI, and you're only seeing things that you have been given access to. I've asked this repeatedly. So why would we use OneDrive? It's encrypted, so it's safe. You don't want to use anything like Dropbox or Box for work unless you've been given some sort of super top secret special permission, which I know it's another story. We're only using OneDrive. It's cloud-based and it's encrypted. It's safe for all of our work information. Again, it's accessible from anywhere. It's backed up so we don't lose it. So your desktop on your computer is not necessarily backed up. I personally have lost everything on my desktop before because it wasn't backed up and my computer died. OneDrive is backed up, so it's there and it stays there. OneDrive also has versioning, so you can go back to a previous version of a document. You can't really do that with a network drive unless you've saved, 10, 12 copies, however. OneDrive automatically versions your documents, which means, you need to go back to the one you used on Friday. You can go back and do that. And OneDrive is connected to other Microsoft tools, so you don't have to use desktop tools or applications. I talked to someone about this yesterday, and it was interesting. One of the other advantages of using OneDrive or any of these online Microsoft tools is they're updated all the time. What we're using on our desktops is not updated as quickly as what's online. So you have more tools, more bells and whistles in the office.com online version of Microsoft. So why do we use SharePoint? And this is one that probably most of us haven't used as much or been as aware of using. So SharePoint allows for more organization, and it's like a website-like interface. So it's on inside, it's still private, but it looks more like a web page versus a team is, an application. OneDrive is an application. With SharePoint, you can share files, tasks, calendars, lists, etc. You can share it with a specific group or an entire organization. What I want you to remember about SharePoint that's helpful is it's really built for document management for a group. So OneDrive's for your documents. SharePoint's allowing you to share documents with your whole department, division, whomever you've chosen to share with. Again, it's accessible from anywhere and it's always backed up. And the focus of SharePoint is collecting and disseminating documents for your group. So they use the phrase document library in SharePoint. It's really meant to be a one-stop shop for collecting and sharing documents with your group. Then there's Teams. So Teams is used more for groups or projects. I'm using the word group a lot, but it's really a conversation tool or a meeting tool is what I want you to think of it as. You can do a lot of other things with Teams, but the main focus is for you to be able to build these channels onto Teams so you can have conversations with a large group or smaller groups. The focus is less on document management and more on communication. So you can add documents to Teams. They're harder to find. They're a little harder to organize. It can be done, of course, But really, again, the focus of Teams is communication for meetings, for meeting notes, for chats, things like that. Again, you can link to all the other Office 365 tools. And one of the main reasons Teams is a real benefit is we can reduce the number of emails that we're receiving if we use Teams chat and posts on Teams. So I mentioned before we start, there was a new study from LinkedIn that was talking about how many more meetings and emails that we have now since the pandemic, something like 50% more than pre-pandemic. I think that we're over communicating in some ways because we're not getting to see each other in person as much. Teams is going to reduce the number of emails and chats because it's built into that one little platform. Have I missed any questions so far?
We had a question about versioning. If regardless of the file type, OneDrive does the versioning. And my answer was, other than images and audio files, which I have not tested, if it's a Microsoft document, it does have versioning.
Yeah, I haven't tested images or audio files. So someone else mentioned that you can back up your desktop to OneDrive, like your documents folder, and you can. The one caveat I would give you is anything you put on your desktop is going to slow your computer down. You don't think it's slowing it down, but it is. Your computer is going to have to work harder because that desktop's constantly refreshing. This is my understanding of it. So if I'm saying it wrong, please feel free to speak up. You're slowing your computer down by saving so much on your desktop. So try to break the habit if you can. I realize I do it too. At least try to keep it clean frequently, but you can back up your desktop, absolutely. Okay. Let's talk about a couple of use cases because we talk about these in theory, but actually talking about how we use them might be more helpful. These are just a couple of use cases. You're going to have more specific things based on what you're doing as well. So feel free to speak up. So we're going to use Leslie's files as a use case, and I can't show you all her files because that's, a privacy issue. But we're going to give you some sort of information about how she uses OneDrive for her files. So when she first started working from home, she was having some trouble getting to the network drives on her laptop. I have had this trouble as well. I don't know if anyone else has. So the advantage to OneDrive is that you can get to those files from anywhere. They're not going to disappear. The network drives are reliant on other things. Something could happen to them when you're at home. You want to be able to get to the files you need when you need them. The other thing, as we mentioned before, is not all files are backed up on your PC. Your network drives should be backed up. But again, it's just ease of access having them online in OneDrive. That OneDrive, again, you can get to from anywhere. So whether she's working on campus, off campus, I don't know, she decides to go on vacation but wants to check her email, which she should never do, she could still get to those OneDrive documents. You could share those files also from your phone. So if you have the OneDrive app, or you just go to your Google browser and you log in, or your Edge browser, whatever you're using, you can still get to all your documents from your phone. As we always say here, we don't want you to work from outside of your work hours, but it happens that someone asks you for something and you're on the go. You can still get to those files from your phone. You do not have to have an MD Anderson phone to do that either. So you can still get to those files and share them with someone if you need to. You can also create a file instantly when you're on the office.com pages, the OneDrive pages. So if you need to create a Word document in Excel, whatever, quickly, you're at a different computer, you're in a different space, you can quickly go to the OneDrive site and create a file and share it and collaborate right then. One of the big things we want to recommend to you, and something that Leslie's extremely good at, is file structure. So she has built a file structure for herself that makes sense, but no matter what file structure you create, you need to regularly prune that file structure. So all of us get lost in our files, and it is difficult sometimes to stop your day and say, I need to clean up my files. But it's going to save you time in the long run. So one thing that we like to recommend is doing something like creating an archive folder. Usually we will name the archive folder Z archive, so it'll go to the bottom of your files list. Put things in your archive folder that you haven't used in a long time. maybe you're not ready to delete it, but it's muddying up your file structure. So put it in your archive folder. Maybe in a year, go back through. If you haven't used it in a year, do you still need it? You could let it, sort of languish in the in the archive folder, or you can delete it at that point. It's up to you. But it gets it out of the, top surface file structures so that you don't have, extra noise there. Let me see if I missed any other questions.
Let's see. Someone says that they occasionally have problems with opening PDF files when they're in OneDrive. But I think that could be what's it called? The file type problem. So we can talk about that a little bit, about trying to fix your file type.
Okay. Hold on, I was just looking, there was something else. Oh, so someone else mentioned, if you feel more comfortable in the desktop applications, but you still want to save to OneDrive so you can get to things easily, you can open up any OneDrive file from the desktop application. So I do that as well. PowerPoint feels more comfortable to me on the desktop. Maybe it's just old school of me. But so if I want to use this file, for instance, is in OneDrive, I just open up my PowerPoint from the desktop, open up the file, and I work from there, and it automatically saves to OneDrive for me. So you're just saving it to a different place. You can still use that application on your desktop if it feels more comfortable to you, or it's not looking right on the office.com version. That happens too. Things don't format the same, maybe. Open it from the desktop, just save it to the cloud in OneDrive so that it's backed up and you could get to it from another desktop. That's a great tip. So a SharePoint use case, for example, that I wanted to mention, when we go to Inside, we're using SharePoint. The difference is that the institution has this super special communications SharePoint that they use because they're trying to communicate with the whole institution. But any of us can create a SharePoint site for ourselves that can be accessible just to our team, or accessible just to a few people, or to the whole institution. So an example here is the library news website that we created. Excuse me, the library news SharePoint that we created. This site was created by us in the library to share news with the larger group, so with anyone at the institution. In this case, we wanted to be able to share information with everyone. We didn't limit it just to our department. And the site wasn't really meant for a lot of interaction. It was designed just to share that information. So we're using it like a news site. We post information, things about new resources, new classes, new services. We do have links where someone could reach out and say, hey, we need help with this. So you can put link outs to other things. We could load documents if we wanted, but in this case, we've kept it really simple. We're just sharing information. It's available on Inside. Anybody can type in library news and get to it. This is sort of a screenshot of the library news website. One thing we wanted to point out is when you create a SharePoint site, you also have a team automatically. And you'll notice there's a tiny Teams icon next to the library news title. Anyone can click on that and go to the team. Now, in this case, I'm not doing anything with the team. I'm really focused again on sharing news on the SharePoint site, but it's there if somebody wanted to go to it. We could do more, continue the conversation on the team if we wanted to. Another SharePoint use case that's more of a document sharing option is this is a SharePoint site we created called RML Classes. This is for research medical library classes. This is internal for us. This is for our education team and our department. And full shout out to Erwin Metter for creating this. This was built for the staff to share files, policies, procedures, reports, statistics. So a file structure was created. We did discuss it then as a group, so that, if things didn't totally make sense, we could make changes to that and we could do that again. But it's meant to be a one-stop shop for all of our documents and our files, kind of like the network drive, except it's organized just for our education projects. So anyone on our staff can get to this site, get to the files they need quickly. They just have to have this site bookmarked on their browser. So that's another use case. All right. For a Teams use case, the most obvious one we could mention was the Tool Time Tuesday. Now, the purpose of the Tool Time Tuesdays team is for us to have conversations. We have opened that team up to everyone at the institution to interact with and share information. So we can ask questions, we can share info. The channels were created so people could share and search for content on specific topics within the team. And again, it was designed for communication in one place. So I could email y'all every day and give you some tips, but that would be annoying because you're getting a lot of emails. It's easier for me to post on the team. And then when you have time, you can go in and check it. So documents can be shared here, and we do things like share the slides after the session, but they're not the focus. The focus is the conversation. Another Teams use case is we have a library staff team, and I'm going to guess many of you have a staff team. The team for the library staff's private. We don't open it up to the whole institution. It's just accessible to our department staff, just to our invited people only. So this allows our department to communicate quickly with each other without, again, a lot of emails. Now, we can still send an email out to the staff if there's something critical, like, we need you to turn in this document today, that's an email. But if we're just, trying to communicate an update to policies and procedures that maybe we discussed in the last staff meeting or things like that, it's easier to do that in Teams. It doesn't get lost in the email. We have staff meeting notes that are kept here. You can use documents to upload or just add a notebook, a OneNote notebook in your team and keep your notes in there so people can go back and search them. And we also added a channel called the water cooler. So the water cooler is just what a water cooler is. It's meant for people to share photos, fun news articles, pictures, stories, whatever. We had some staff members get engaged recently and they shared some pictures on there, and it was just a wonderful way to celebrate, even though we can't all be together, to celebrate. So the water cooler was just a fun channel. The other channels are used for more business purposes. Let's talk about some best practices for these different tools. And there are people putting some best practices in the chat as well, which is great. So first, don't panic. And we talked about this in the beginning. Don't panic ever. But when you see lots of files and teams that aren't yours, this is not something to panic about. You're seeing files that were either shared with you or teams or sites that you've visited. Sometimes even when you click on a news article on Inside, that shows up in your recent documents or recently viewed sites. So don't think you're looking at something top secret. Most of the time it's something that's been shared with you. Your documents are not made public to anyone unless you choose to share them. So if you know there's something top secret, the right way to say it, something private that you're not supposed to share, you just want to be thoughtful when you share, within the institution to make sure that it's only being shared with the people that you want to share it with. We also want to mention that it's important not to just make a team, a site, a folder without considering why you're using the tool. So when we first started in the pandemic, everyone was making a team. How many of you got like a random team invite? And then a lot of times the teams just died because nothing was happening on the team. So think about why you're creating it and make a plan for it. Make sure that it's sustainable. So something that's not just going to sit there and languish, but something that you're going to sustain, you're going to keep up with the best you can. For OneDrive, you can search the full text of your files in OneDrive. I still find the search to be a little squirrely. So to me, organizing your files by name, date, and project or department is the most important thing. Create a file structure that makes sense to you and regularly prune it, which is the last point here, but I just want to remind you to prune things that you're not using anymore. Put them in an archive folder. You don't want them, it sort of causes, to me, it causes visual stress to have extra things that just aren't necessarily to be there. Don't forget that you have that version history. So you can select any document in OneDrive, choose version history. There's a little dot, dot, dot. Next to that, you can choose the version of the document you want to restore and choose restore. You can also restore deleted items from the recycle bin. So items are deleted after 93 days. That's what at least that's what the system says. So you can restore things if you've accidentally deleted them. And again, remember to prune and archive your old files. A couple of best practices for SharePoint. For me, it was easier in SharePoint to work from a template. So when we started that library news site, I need to give full credit to Valerie Fallon for doing that. She started our library news website. It's easier to start from a template and then, delete things you don't need. Or you can go back and add something that you do need. Instead of trying to start from scratch, the templates on office.com are really helpful. And there are templates for almost everything in office.com that you might not be able to see on the desktop tools in Office, but you can see in the online version. You can also just start small. So don't try to add all the things at first. Start small and build from there. Instead of sharing a OneDrive folder with a group, consider where it should live. Maybe it could be part of your SharePoint site. Instead of having a bunch of shared folders, you could have an organized system in SharePoint. Create a structure that your entire group can follow. A lot of people ask me how to start a team or a SharePoint that their department will actually use. You have to get buy-in. You have to ask for feedback from colleagues. You have to show them along the way what you're building and ask for feedback. I know it's frustrating sometimes because everyone has their own vision of what they like to see, but you have to get buy-in from the group. And a team is always connected to your SharePoint site. So if you'll remember on SharePoint, you're always going to have that team's icon. You don't have to use the team to use the SharePoint site at all. Okay, let's see. Did I miss any questions?
We got a brand new question.
Okay.
We have a number of external collaborators. Is there a way to make OneDrive easier for them to access without having to get an emailed access code every time? And are SharePoint and Teams able to be used with external folks?
Teams can be used with external folks. OneDrive can be used with external folks. Did we try SharePoint, Leslie?
I don't think we tried SharePoint.
I don't think we've tried SharePoint. I don't believe SharePoint's viewable for external people, but I haven't tested it, so we'll have to. We do have instructions for how to share externally, but it's not easy. So Leslie, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so depending on what you want to do in Teams, for example, I work with librarians at 4 other libraries, and so they need to communicate with me. So what we did was we created a chat in Teams that I created, and then we went in and we talked for a minute and we chatted for a minute, and then we ended the team, and that team, I mean, not the team, we ended the meeting, and that chat is there in perpetuity in that particular case. So I don't have a team for my external collaborators, but I do have chats for my external collaborators in the Teams interface, if that makes sense.
So this may be a question to bring back to Anna to see if there's any easier way to share with external collaborators. We do have some steps on how to do that that we can post on the team again, on the tool time team again. It is not easy though. And so I think it's a good opportunity for these upcoming sessions that are happening to bring that up again. The only way to make change is to keep talking about it, to keep asking about it. And sometimes it's hard to bring things up, but it's important to just maybe in these new sessions coming up, we can ask about that and say, how can we make it easier to work with external collaborators? Because that's an important part of what we do.
Okay, so we got a really great question. How do
Okay.
I start a SharePoint?
Okay. I think did I miss the last slide? I did, but that's okay. Okay. how do you start a SharePoint? Okay, I have to remember now, Leslie.
I know.
We did
I
it from
haven't
a
had to
team.
do this.
Did we do it from a team?
Not with library news. We did not.
Let me get instructions for you on how we started it, because I have started some, but for some reason my mind is blanking right now on how we started it.
What do y'all want to do again?
If
How
you
do
want
you
to start a
SharePoint?
SharePoint.
Oh, I think you just do it from here. Just go to create a new one from your actual teams.
From your teams, okay.
Yeah.
So I
So-
think that might have been what we did.
Yeah, so you go to your actual teams and then you decide who you want to share with or make it public for your group. You give access to whoever you want, like you were mentioning.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's kind of like your OneDrive. So you just give access to people and what their role they have. So
I think when we originally did it, we went to the team, we started a team. Is this correct, or am I?
yes, yeah, that is
Mhm.
correct.
And you click on the plus sign, and then you can go to SharePoint from there.
Yes. You give it
And-
a name and, you know.
So in this case, I think I have a SharePoint for this one possibly, or maybe I don't.
For
But you
Tool
go
Time
through-
Tuesday, yeah, we definitely do.
So you
Yeah.
go through a process to add it this way. And then just take it one step at a time too. Don't try to do all the things at once, but you can create a SharePoint site this way. But maybe I'll go back and write up some basic instructions or share some basic instructions for that too.
Right.
Thank you. Because my brain just blanked.
Mm.
Okay,
Okay.
so that is a good question. Okay, so we'll share the external collaborators.
Yes, please do, because mine, I have something where it has to be private.
Yes.
And
And
so
it's for a
having
team or a SharePoint?
the teams, so I cannot have chats or conversation in it. And that's something I will have to instruct them not to put anything in it, because the meeting is a institutional wise and it has to be privacy.
Okay. Okay,
So-
I'm gonna write this down and I'm gonna share it with Anna as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So what is available on how to best utilize Teams for those of us who are novice for the tool? So there are basic classes in LinkedIn Learning on how to use Teams. There's also an Office 365 Central that I can share with you.
Right.
YouTube.
YouTube.
Yes, YouTube. One of my favorite YouTube channels is someone, her name is Layla Durrani, I think.
Gatarani.
Yes. She has
What about
great.
Kevin?
Oh, Kevin's
Kevin,
good too.
he used
Yeah.
to work at SharePoint.
Yeah. So there's a couple good ones that we can share with you.
Yeah.
So we'll do that as well. Okay, so there's so much information. What I wanted to remind you of was the sessions coming up. Let me see if I can get back to that. And keep asking. Sorry, I'm going to make everyone dizzy. Keep asking questions, because the more we ask, the more we talk about it, the more we can advocate for what we need, like the external users. I apologize. So there's this Ask Microsoft Anything session coming up. This is a great time for us to ask a little bit more about those external collaborators, but I'm going to ask internally as well. And there's a
Okay.
Teams one-on-one webinar.
Who's given that class? Do you know?
So the first one I think is actually Microsoft.
It is, it's an
Oh.
Ask Microsoft. So it's basically like an AMA if you're familiar with Reddit, but it's Microsoft staff.
So that's a good opportunity. It is different at Anderson Wright because we have different permissions, but it's still worth going and asking the questions. So we can then ask IT, like, this is what we need. What can we do? And then I believe Anna is doing this Teams 101 webinar, or someone that's working with Anna. So we're going to post all of this later as well.
Thank you.
So much information. So please continue